Hey guys, can you guys hear me now? I think that's working. I have Jim and Uva and Kirsten over here too, who are going to be feeding me questions, and I'm looking forward to get this started. So first of all, thank you guys for a wonderful start of the campaign. It's been very exciting, and we're really looking forward to getting this game to your tables. We've been working really hard for several years on this, and it's nice to finally see it coming to fruition, and that we can finally get started on the final production of it soon. So they'll be posting questions you guys have for me to our chat here as you guys give them. But first, I want to go over several things. First of all, the rules. A lot of you guys are asking for the rules. We will be posting a large section of the rules, not a complete, thorough rule book where it's every single detail about gameplay questions that might come up, but we will be posting rules by the end of the campaign that will have the overall game structure of what you need to know for how to start playing the game. But in the meantime, until we have that whole rulebook compiled, we will be posting the important section of the rules, such as what do you do in a turn, for example? How do you use event cards? How do events get resolved? We'll be posting those over the coming throughout the campaign as we get those laid out. Rules take a long time to write. Generally, a rule book takes us about 2 months to fully complete. And to do that, we need the final art. We need all the assets, because when you're writing a rule book, we can't just say, mention an event card. We need to show you event card, because just naming a game piece doesn't make the rules make a lot of sense. So that's why we had to wait until we got these assets created, and then we could start working on the rules. So that's what we're working on right now. We are working on putting those final art assets in the rules so that they can actually make sense to you. And we're very excited to see what you guys think of it as we start posting the first ones and sections in the next few days. So we have the first question. Can you explain how well this plays with 2 players? How do you store system tiles between game sessions? So those are our first 2 questions. So the 2 players. This game works great 2 players. We've played a lot of different player counts in this game over the past year to really get a sense of how it paces and feels depending on the number of players you have. And the great thing is this game is as much about your personal journey in the game as it is with the interaction with other players. So you can have, even if you don't have more than one other player to have interactions with, you still have a really fun journey developing your empire, exploring events as you travel through game. Players are also not the only things you'll be interacting with. There's all sorts of people you can meet through event cards that you get to interact with. There's non-player ships like space amoebas and void clouds and crystalline entities that you'll have to contend with. So there's a lot of things that you'll be having diplomatic relations with and combat with that are not other players. So you can expect that be able to explore all the different parts of the game, even if you don't have a lot of players in the game. So if you only have 2 players, it doesn't mean you're guaranteed that you are going to be enemies with that players. You could still become allies and face the galaxy together, because there's other threats other than just other players to contend with. One big one of those is a crisis, which we will be talking about in a future live stream. I'm not going to talk about that specifically now, but that's one big non-player threat that the whole galaxy will have to work together with to defeat eventually. Then there's then the other cool thing about going off of does this work well with 2 players? The nice thing is the game does not really scale up very much in time as you add more players. So a 2-player game is not much quicker than a 6-player game. And this is because we have the simultaneous planning and then resolution part of a phase, where the part where players are thinking, they're trying to strategize and figure out what they want to do in a turn. All those players are doing that at the same time, and that really speeds up the game and keeps the game moving fast, no matter how many players you have simultaneously planning. The next question we had was, can I explain how do you store system tiles between games? So in the bottom of the box, and we'll be posting a 3D model of this in the campaign once we get the 3D renders finished of the trays. We have the schematic layouts, but we need a nice show how the components fit in the box we're working on. The bottom of the box has a bottom tray where you put your system tiles. And there are a total of 8 wells for the different system tiles. Starting out, you only have one system. And between those games, if you only have one system, you store that system in one of the 4 wells. So each player has their own well in the bottom of the game box. And so as you, in your home system, you also put any of your planets that you have in that system on top of the system in the bottom tray. And if there's for example, an event card that is specifically attached to that system, you also put that card in the well with that system. So everything that is associated with the system, any resources you still have not mined from the system, go into the bottom tray on top of the system. If your empire has multiple systems, you stack your systems on top of your homes, on top of your other system, so you just have a stack of systems. And when you put the game away between games, you actually start from the outside to the inside. So you put your systems that are the farthest away from your empire first in your tray, then the ones that are right next to your home system in the tray, and then finally your home system on top. So that way, when you're building your empire back up, you start out with your home system and you work outward. Now, what's important to keep the same is which systems have hyperlane connections to which systems. And we do this by indicating which way these hexagonal systems fit into your hexagonal wells in your tray in the box. Which edge they point to will indicate which edge from your home system that system extends from. So it's very easy to record how your system spreads out from your home system. And I'm sure I'm not very explaining this well because I have not had to explain it very often, so I don't have the description down. But we'll be putting that's one of the things we'll be describing as the rule book expands over the course of the campaign. So next, can you explain how the storyline keys work? Yes, I can. I have one example card here, and let me grab a few more. So these are some of my physical prototypes that I have that are a little out of date because then eventually, because of the pandemic, we went to fully online playtesting. But overall, even though graphically they look a little bit different, they have the same structure. So every story card, we'll do this one right here first. Every story card has a narrative event right here. So this tells you the beginning story. Then you have anywhere from 2 to 4 choices. And depending on what you choose, these arrows on the side will tell you to either put the card face up, right side up, or upside down into your player screen. I apologize for the glare. It's a little hard to read sometimes. And this slides right into your player screen. This is one of our old physical prototype player screens from about a year ago. And you can see then only a certain lock shows that can be unlocked by a matching key to have you draw this event card from the game box supply of cards. So depending on which way you put this card in, it can lead to different cards down the story path. So that's where you have an event, you make choices, and that leads to a future event card that you will eventually encounter in the game. Now, when you encounter that event card, could be the very next round, it could be several games later. So the ramifications, the long-term ones of your choices might not always be known. But it's important to know that when you make choices on cards, they both have an immediate effect and a long-term effect. So there's both things to consider when you're going down these story paths. The other kind of cool thing is that cards will often have these keys. So these are the keys on the card. So when you draw an event card, you first check this, and if none of these conditions are met, then you move on to the general event. And so that's where this key is. If you have a E lock, this E key unlocks that event lock and will continue the event. So let me find an E key here so I can have an accurate description. But I can't find my E lock right now. But the point is, these are your keys to unlock your continuation of events. You also have locks on these cards. And this one says, if you draw this event card and you have the xenophobe ethic, you will draw this event card and you resolve this event card instead of this one that you drew. So this is how we introduce events specific to different ethics, authorities, and origins, and other things that you can acquire in the game. And so this is a very kind of robust story system that is really determined on how you design your empire and the choices you make on the event cards, and even the technologies you research can give you access to events. And that's actually what our latest stretch goal is all about. We have these kind of things in the base game already, but for the Frontier expansion, every time you research the final technology in a line of technology cards. So for when you, for example, research the most powerful type of laser, and you're the first one to do that in the game, it will let you draw a event card specific to researching that technology. And you'll have now a new story tree because you reached that technology first. And how your choice in that technology will have you be adding cards to the game so that you leave a permanent impact on your game and how it moves forward. So now, people want to ask how combat works. I will be covering that in a whole separate video. I don't want to talk about too many different things at once, but essentially it's by a die roll. You roll a d10, and every weapon has an accuracy. And so if you have a 7 accuracy, you will hit your target if you roll a 7 or under. Weapons, though, also have a maximum amount of damage they can do. So you do the amount of damage you roll if it's under your accuracy. So if I rolled a 2 on a d10 and you needed a 7 to hit, I would do 2 damage. However, if your weapon has a maximum amount of damage it can do to a particular type of defense, for example, say you can only do maximum of 1 damage to shields, that 2 damage I dealt gets reduced down to my 1 max damage against shields. So it's a single die roll system that takes into account both your accuracy to hit and the maximum damage you can do with a weapon while still inflicting a range of possible damage values. So as your weapons get more and more powerful, your maximum damage will go up, which gives you greater range. You'll sometimes still do only 1 damage, but your potential maximum damage goes up. And this is one thing that keeps combat exciting between players of different technology levels. A more powerful player's weapons are not necessarily just guaranteed to destroy a weaker player's ship. I better take a drink of water. So I'll be going into much more detail how full ship combat works. It's much easier to explain when we have graphics, and this is one thing I'll be going over in our second playthrough live stream video. Our first live stream tomorrow, where we're going to be showing us playing the game on Tabletop Simulator, is mostly going to be focused on how you resolve a turn and how the general flow of the game works. And then on our next live playthrough stream, I'll be focusing more how combat works, for example. Next, can you describe how you made a PC game into a board game? Did anything have to be left out in the board game? So we are traditionally a historical board game company. That's how we started. We designed historical games that we first try hard to make engaging and fun to play, but also impart the feel and knowledge about the history that the game is about. And so what we did when designing Stellaris is that we treated the video game and its mechanisms and its theme as history. We used all the same processes we use when we design a history game to design a board game based off this PC. So when we do that, we first just design a good game. We figure out a set of mechanics that makes a fun 4X board game that does the things that we set out wanting to do, which was starting out, we wanted to make a 4X game that was more accessible than traditional 4X games on the market. And that meant that new players could more easily get into the game, and that you could get this game to your table more. So that's why we set out the design goal of making this anywhere from around a 2-hour game. And then we also wanted to make it have more depth, where you could build an empire and develop it to greater heights than you could in most 4X board games. And those two things, a game that's shorter but has more depth, seem like they're opposites, that you can't get both those things into one board game. But we've managed to achieve that by having this continuation of play between games, that you can continue playing and develop the same empire over multiple games. So you get that accessibility where your empires start very easy to play with not too many rules to learn to get started. But then as you get familiar with the game, you start adding new mechanics through technology, gain access to really interesting things through events, until the game grows to this really engaging, unique experience to you. And then when you're finished with it, you can start again and start a new empire. But your next playthrough, you'll be able to interact with some of the things you did in your past game, and maybe even discover some anomalies and artifacts left over by your past playthroughs. So yes, so that's just what our strategy of making a good game is. Then after we have the good game, that we felt like we achieved those goals, we then start working on what are the things that make the history or Stellaris feel like it feels. And we then massage and slightly alter our game system so that we give that same feel. We don't simulate the video game or the history on a one-for-one basis of mechanics, because that would make a board game that was completely unplayable, because the video game relies on a computer to take care of a lot of the background stuff. Instead, we use good, solid board game mechanics that give the same feel that the video game mechanics give. So we focus on the experience and the feeling of the play, rather than saying we're going to port this mechanic one-to-one. Now, that's not to say that a lot of the mechanics don't work exactly the same way as they do in the board game and the video game. We just didn't restrict ourselves in that, and that's how we made this game to be a fun, easy-to-play board game. So next, I'll go on to talk about, can you talk more about player interaction other than combat, such as agreements or intrigue? Yes. So there are two main non-combat ways that you can interact with other players. First of all, it's through the standard diplomatic agreements. So you'll see in the video that you have a diplomacy stand, the video, the Kickstarter intro video. And that diplomacy stand has an icon for all of these standard diplomatic agreements you can make in Stellaris. So you can form trade agreements. You can form non-aggression pacts where you can't declare war on each other like instantly. You can form migration treaties. You can even vassalize another player where they are forced to work with you. So you can do all those agreements you can in the video game, in the board game. And those agreements you can freely make with other players. That is open for negotiating and bartering. And so that is that interaction. And they're trying to get those mutual benefits with people that you're okay giving those benefits to and receiving benefits from. Then there's also the political cards. The political cards are cards that you draw during your exopolitics phase. You get access to one political card at the beginning of your exopolitics phase, and you keep that in your political hand as long as you want. But you can play it whenever, during any future phase, or even the current political exopolitics phase you're in. These political cards, and I don't think I have a physical one. We'll be going detail. I'll be showing that in the live playthrough tomorrow. But each political card has two options on it: a top option that is highly conditional, and a bottom option that you would always be able to play. Now, the top options are conditional based off either the person's empire state you want to play it on, or your own empire if you want to play it on yourself. So, for example, if a player has unemployed population on one of their planets, this card would say, if a enemy player has unemployed population, you may move one of their unemployed population to your planet. So because there's unemployed population, that political card lets you migrate population from their empire to your empire. However, if no player has unemployed population, or you don't really want to play that card on a friend, there's always a bottom option that's non-conditional. And we also have tried to pair an aggressive option with a non-aggressive option. So there are cards that can give benefit to other players or even yourself. So those are cards you can play on an ally or yourself. And so those are a lot of times like planetary decisions that will give you bonuses. So in these political cards, we have a huge variety of options. But one of the key design strategies in the Stellaris game is that we don't overwhelm you with all those options at once. You always have a subset of options to work off of. And so we have the ease of play, but also the depth of play in the same experience. I also want to mention is you're at the beginning of the game, you're only limited to gaining one political card a turn or within a round. But through technologies and traditions, you can gain access to more political cards per round. So you can actually strategize and gear your empire to be a political power who works in the background and not just through war. Okay. Next, we have, could a person come and join in a game after a few rounds have gone by? Now, the way the game is set up is players can leave a game and join a game, or join your overall galactic experience between each 2-hour game. So you can play for 2 hours, finish that game, which we call a game and era. And then if you want to continue playing, you could keep playing with the same board setup. And it's at that point when you end an era that a new player could come in, and anybody who wants to leave can leave. So you can't jump in the middle of an era. I mean, to be fair, you can. There's nothing stopping a player, but then they actually probably will not have a chance to win that era. So that's why we don't write that in the rules. But to be honest, there's no reason why somebody could not just join the middle of the era or even leave in the middle of the game. But you win eras by completing enough objectives to win the era. And if somebody jumps into an era mid-era, then they're probably not going to be able to catch up to the players who've already been playing a round or two working towards those objectives. Again, I'll be covering this again in our live stream of our playing the tabletop simulator tomorrow. I'll then have be able to demonstrate a lot of the stuff on there. Next, yes, I see that the next question I already answered, that you can just join an era mid-era, even if you don't care to win. Can you share a view of a phase board? I don't have any physical printouts here. Again, we'll be going over that in tomorrow's live stream playthrough. And I'll be also, that's what actually I'm working on right now. I have our phase rules, and I am inputting our latest phase board graphics and other graphics into that rule description, so I can be posting on that Kickstarter soon. I'm really hoping I can get that posted tonight, but don't hold me to that, because when you're running Kickstarter, there's always things that are cropping up that unexpectedly take your time. But that's what I've been working on all day, is getting that those description of the phase boards and what you do in each phase up on the Kickstarter page. So next we have, is there a campaign winner or just a game winner? So yes, there are kind of two scopes of the game. You are trying to win each game era. So that's that 2-hour play experience. You need to achieve a certain number of objectives to win that era. Now, the number of there's a number of public objectives out there that everybody is trying to achieve. However, the number of objectives you need to achieve is equal to your current era number, how many eras you've played. So if you're in your very first era, you only need to achieve 1 objective. Somebody who's in their 3rd era would have to achieve 3. And this is one of the balancing factors. It's not the only one, but it's one of the balancing factors that keeps players at different eras competitive within a game. And if you achieve that, if you achieve your necessary number of eras, you win that era, and that triggers the end of that era. The era will end at the end of the round. You trigger the end. So other players do have a chance to achieve their necessary number of objectives. Now, they don't win the era, but they'll still get an era reward, because at the end of an era, the person who won the era draws a number of era reward cards. And these give short-term bonuses, and you will also slide that era reward into your player screen. And the effects of your era reward is one of the things that progresses you towards a campaign victory. I'll get to that in a second. But then after you make your choice, you then pass the hand to the next person who achieved their necessary number of wins. So you can have multiple players get the era rewards, but the person who gets there first gets a first choice of rewards. And so they're more likely to get a reward that pushes them down their path to victory. Okay, next. Is there a campaign winner? Or yeah, campaign winner. Then, to win the overall campaign, you will have to, there are 3 ways you can do that. And we call those the 3 ways to ascend. And you are going to have to collect enough ascension symbols, one of those being through era rewards, another way through events, and then there's some others, such as technology. Once you get enough of these era rewards, or these ascension path symbols, you will then gain an ascension objective card. And this is a secret objective unique to you. And it is a very tough objective, because once you achieve that objective, your empire will then ascend, which means they get to a point where they are no longer in threat of falling into becoming a fallen empire, and they will then lead your game in victory. And I won't go in the different ways that they ascend, because we don't want to spoil all the things about the game. There's a lot of things to discover about this game. But when you ascend and you win the campaign with your species and leave the game, you will then choose ascension event cards based off which of the 3 ways you ascended. And you will choose ascension event cards from the supply to add to the event and anomaly event decks. And those represent how your ascended species still interacts with the galaxy and the other players. So you choose how your ascended species will stay in the game even after you stop playing them. But the other important thing to know is the Ascension event cards you can choose are determined on how you design your empire. So there's certain ethics that certain Ascension event cards you only can choose if you don't have a certain type of ethic or if you have a certain type. And some will even have to require to get special event cards or technology symbols in your player screen in order to add those to the deck of event cards for future players to interact with. So yeah, that was a lot of detail. But the next thing I want to say is anybody else can still achieve a campaign victory. It is any number of people can eventually ascend. So you have the private goal of winning the campaign with your private empire. Then you're competing with other players to get access to those era rewards first. And other things in the game, like resources, to better be prepared to ascend. Okay, next question. Can you describe eras and how sieves and later eras interact with early era sieves? How do you prevent advanced sieves from steamrolling baby sieves? How do you advance an era? So after you finish an era first, everybody automatically advances an era. So no matter whether you won an era or lost an era, you will advance to the next era. In the balancing factors, there are several. The objective cards are one of them. Objective cards sometimes scale based off what era you have. And this also plays into steamrolling. Higher objective cards, higher era objective cards will often have higher eras have to interact with lower eras in specific ways. One of the objective cards, for example, says you have to have a diplomatic agreement with somebody who's equal or lower era with you. And you get a reward for having a diplomatic agreement with somebody who's even the lowest era. So if you want to get that objective, you'd promote players to do that. Now, there's more objectives always than you have to get, so you don't have to do that. There's always other paths to victory. But we promote some of the later objective cards to make it that's not just about war. War is a potential path to victory, but it is not the only path by a far. So that's another reason advanced empires don't just steamroll over weaker empires. There's often more benefits to working together than apart. The other aspect is that we have a pretty healthy diplomacy system. You can have several weaker empires who have a defense pact with each other. So if one gets war declared on them, they all go to war against the aggressor. So those are two examples of how lower empire work with more powerful empires. And I already covered combat, where because of the way that damage is always a range, that more powerful ships are not necessarily always going to one-shot weaker ships. That's also very important. And the last way that I can think of off the top of my head is that how the economy works in the game. As your empire gets bigger and bigger, you build bigger navy, more systems, more population, you're going to have more upkeep. So you're not going to have as many resources in your tray as you would think, because you're always going to be having to discard resources from your tray permanently to pay for that upkeep. So big empires in later eras generally have about as many resources available to them to do stuff turn to turn as younger era sieves. Now you'll be maybe a little bit more specialized, and you'll have a lot more options in terms of your action cards that you can be a little bit more efficient, but your profit economy is not that much different than the lower era empires. Next, we'll do how many event and action cards are in the game with all expansions. Will there be future expansions? So assuming we unlock all the stretch goals, we're looking at around 3,000 event and action cards and other cards in the game. Each player starts out with a deck. I think it's what was it? 130 tech cards, 120. I'd have to look at the Kickstarter page of card count because I have trouble remembering, because in development we tried all different tech trees, so I can't remember what the final card count of the final tech tree actually was off the top of my head. But we have a pretty large tech tree. The Frontier expansion adds a lot to that. We have a strong event deck that I can't remember exactly. It's a few hundred event cards starting out, that we will be unlocking a lot more event cards through social stretch goals that we'll start posting today. That's something I'll cover probably at the end of the live stream, how that's going to work. And so yeah, that's how many cards are in the game. And yes, we do plan on releasing future expansions that will include the content from Stellaris DLCs. So eventually you will be able to play robotic empires. You will be able to form those more detailed federations. But in this base experience, just so we can get out this game with a reasonable number of components in the first game, and also the time it takes to develop, the more and more content you add, the more and more time it takes to develop. We're starting with just the basic version of Stellaris, and we'll be adding that DLC content in future expansions. Now, important thing to know is that we'll be consolidating those expansions into fewer expansion boxes. So you're not going to have tens of mini expansions. We're going to be consolidating them into larger box expansions. But that's way in the future. We're just excited to get this first campaign, make this first campaign successful, and get this first game out and make it the best game we can be. And then we'll start thinking about expansions after that. Crisis bosses. That looks like the only one question they have there that I have not answered. And okay, crisis bosses. So before you can win the campaign with an empire, you first also have to overcome a crisis. Crises will periodically happen every few games. So you will have a crisis era happen. And a crisis era is different than a normal era game because a crisis will invade the galaxy. Now, you still have the normal objectives. All the normal stuff is still in the game. But you also have this powerful crisis to contend with. And it comes with a number of different crisis ships and units that are the minions, or the small things that you'll have to contend with. And then also the crisis boss, which are these really great miniatures that we are in the Kickstarter that replace just boss counters that are in the base game otherwise. A few cool things is that depending on what paths players are taking towards Ascension, influences about which crisis you attract to your galaxy. So what research you're doing into experimental Ascension paths, or what endgame rewards you take as a group, will affect what crisis invades your galaxy. Also, the other cool thing is that the crisis scales with the era level of the players. So if you have all players who are at era 4, it will be stronger than if a crisis hits when there is one player at era 6 and then most players are at era 1 and 2. So it will scale in terms of total difficulty, and crises also have a tendency to do more against the strongest player, so that the crisis won't still be a threat to the weaker players, but more of its actions will be geared towards the strongest players in the game, so that they are the ones that are going to have to overcome it. And this is, again, another way that weaker empires and stronger empires dynamics is interesting. The strongest empire cannot face a crisis alone. They will need the aid of the younger empires to overcome it. So this is where you're going to have a shakeup where old rivalries might have to be overcome to actually and new diplomatic agreements have to be formed to beat this crisis. Um, yeah, so that's a crisis bosses. Which one? Same as in the PC? Okay. We have 3 brand new crises in the game. We did that because you're familiar with the crises from the video game. This is also why we did a whole new set of events in the base board game. We wanted to give you new stories and new exciting, unexpected things to experience in the board game, and vice versa. If your first experience is with Stellaris and you play a ton of the board game and then you move to the video game, we don't want the board game to spoil all those great story moments in your first experiences playing Stellaris. We still have some of the most iconic and fun events from Stellaris. Like we have bubbles in the base game, so you can encounter and recruit bubbles, but which is a space amoeba. Yes, we have a whole new set of, and you can see 2 of the crisis bosses. One of them is the Time Master Dreadnought, who is the boss of the Time Mastered Crisis, and then my personal favorite, which is the Stellar Devourer Crisis, where a whole group of Stellar Devourers invade from the edge of the system and start consuming the suns or galaxy one by one until you can hopefully defeat them. Every crisis has a different feel too. You can either defeat a crisis by defeating its crisis boss, but there's also always a non-combat way to defeat the crisis. And you can do that through the tech tree and some other things. It depends on the crisis. I don't want to give away too much because that's part of the experience of the exciting journey to discover these things of how to overcome these crises. Next, live stream tomorrow at 2 p.m. post daylight savings time. Yes, I'll remind you about that. Our live stream tomorrow is at 2 p.m. EST, EDT, since daylight savings time is happening in the U.S. tonight. And we will be doing a live stream of us and some of our team playing the game in Tabletop Simulator. And we'll be showing you how the game plays, and I'll be focusing on a portion of the mechanics. I'm not going to explain everything because I want to focus on one part of the game. This is going to be mainly how you play a turn. And then we'll be doing more live stream demonstrations where we'd be going into other parts of the game. What will you cover during tomorrow's live stream? Okay, I just read that question. It looks like I already answered that. So we'll be going over what you do in the 4 phases of the game and how a round is structured and how you actually win the game. And we'll be playing through a few rounds. I probably won't go into detail about how events work this live stream. We'll do that the next live stream. But I really just want to focus how you play the basic mechanics of the game and how your choices affect your gameplay strategies. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. is playthrough. Yep, that was already added. When game is won, era has ended, and you set up next game / era, next era. How much of your board state do you keep? Do you keep systems or build up your board presence from scratch? You keep all the same systems. You keep all the same planets with the same population clips on them. That's why our population clip on the planets, because those go on top of the system in the game box for you to bring out again in the next game. So you put one system down, the planet with the population clips on it, any other important markers in that system, and then the next system tile on top of that in the box. And so when you pull these tiles out of the box, it's the system with all the pieces already set up on it. And again, that makes system rebuilding really quick and easy. And you keep the same, your action deck you're building by researching technologies from your tech deck. Your tech deck and your action deck stay the same. Your player screen stays the same. Your player screen, this is our old one that we have legs on. The final one goes into your resource tray. This just lays flat in the box in the area that's designated for the box, and all your cards stay in the screen. So it is a great way to just take it out of the box. Everything you did in stories, how you designed your empire, your traits are all saved from game to game. And then you have your resource tray that your screen goes in. You remove your player screen, you put the lid on the resource tray, and that goes in there. That saved your economy. That's all your resources that you've acquired and developed. And so you save everything from game to game. The only thing that we do not save is who you're connected is, your position in the galaxy. One reason we did that is because we always wanted to have that sense of exploration and expansion. No matter how many eras you've played, you always, whenever you start a new game session, you will reconnect to a galaxy, and you can have different neighbors and different position in the galaxy. Now, if you keep playing, if you play one era and you immediately continue playing another era, you can choose to keep the game board state, the board connections, the same. But when you start a new era, you will have that new configuration of how empires actually connect to each other. But your system tiles in your empire will be the same. Okay, I've been told that we are towards the end. Just so you know, we are going to start posting some social stretch goals. We're partnering with some great Stellaris content creators. They are going to be creating, or they've already started writing, stories for the Frontier expansion for Stellaris. And then there are some great stories that these content creators are creating. Some of them are well-known creators that you probably know. And we'll be posting the first one today, and we'll be including links to their content. And we hope that you'll help us unlock these stories. We are also, we've finally caught up and updated the entire stretch goal list. Once we are continuing the campaign, we will be continuing with voting on the next stretch goals, what technology stretch goals you guys want to research next. And so that's one thing that we will be doing. And so we can do it that way. We have the stretch goal tiles where we have to lay out the cards in the stretch goals as you guys choose to vote on which ones you want to research next. You guys started on the campaign unlocking stretch goals so fast that we were not able to lay out the cards in the stretch goal tiles quick enough. And so that's what was the 1 day delay to catching up the full stretch goal list. But we're excited to see where the campaign goes from here. And we are looking forward to the next Q&A. Let me see if there's any last questions. Am I able to play a space Fennec? I don't know what a Fennec is. So that's over my head. Maybe they'll explain it to me and I can answer in the next Q&A. Thank you guys. Feel free, keep asking your questions in the comments. We've gotten a huge deluge of comments, so we're mostly trying to answer them in these live Q&As and also in the FAQ on the Kickstarter. So if you don't get to your question specifically, check the FAQ, and there's probably 10 other people who've asked the same question, and we've answered it there. Thank you very much, and I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.